right. So guess we'll call the meeting to order. The agenda online, I don't have it sitting in front of me. I'm pretty sure the first item, I have a different one on the web page. First item is public comment. We're not required to have public comment, but I think a large focus of this group will be to get public feedback. So I wanted to at least leave that available on the agenda. We don't have anyone here, and we didn't receive anything. We have approval of the minutes. There are no minutes. This is the first meeting. So we can move on to our discussion points. And feel free to chime in at any time. I just wanted to get started and let everybody know kind of a little bit more background than the emails or the conversations that I've had with you as this gets going. So the first item on there is introductions. So I will start with myself. I'm Dan Dunbar. I'm the CIO for Dunn County. And I was asked by our county manager and kind of through the CRNT committee to lead this task force. So that's who I am, and we'll move on. We'll stay in the room here. I'll go over to Jim.
My name's Jim Zons. You can see me in that tiny little window with everybody else. I'm on the Dunn County Board here, supervisor for District 6. I head the Community Resources and Tourism Committee, which oversees broadband in the county. And then in my real life, I run a marketing business called Easy New Media, and we've been in business here for 25 years.
All right. My name is Addison Vang. I work for the University of Madison Division of Extension, and I cover Eau Claire, Chippewa, and Dunn County. My official title is Community Development Educator, with a focus in community food systems and broadband. And I was a former planner for Dunn County. I did our broadband study here as well. So that's it.
All right. Katie, you just came online. You were here for the point of introductions. So I guess we'll go to you next.
Okay, I'm Katie Peter. I'm the Technology Director for the School District of the Menominee area.
All right, and Leanne?
I'm Leanne Ralph. I'm the reporter for the Colfax Messenger and the Glenwood City Tribune, and I'm also the incoming chair for the town of Otter Creek.
And Dan?
Got too many screens up. Yeah, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Dan Lytle. I'm with Chippewa Valley Technical College. I'm also representing economic development within the county. I'm the president of the Greater Menominee Development Corporation and vice president of the Dunn County Economic Development Corporation. And I oversee our Menominee campus for CVTC right here in town.
All right, and I think I messaged in my email, we do have one more and a spot available that is intended to represent agriculture. I've been spending my last couple of weeks trying to encourage somebody. It's a slow process. You ask somebody, then you wait for a response, and then you move on to the next one. So I appreciate the names that many of you have provided. I am utilizing them, and so I do hope that we will have somebody to represent that industry going forward. But wanted to get this moving, so we had to move on without that particular role at this point. So moving on, I threw together a presentation that I had, or a PowerPoint that I had shared with all of you, just to kind of give a little background about some of the things that we're looking for. But to kind of start it off, this task force is being put together to develop a broadband plan for Dunn County. There's a lot of little aspects that come into that we'll get into, but I think the overall focus that you should have in your head is we're trying to come up with a plan that will help guide the Dunn County Board of Supervisors and I think Dunn County in general as to how we are looking to expand and provide broadband to everyone in the county. So just keep that in mind as we go forward, because I'm going to talk a lot about different areas and different things that had happened. And then there is a grant that we have some deliverables that we need to provide as part of that. But I think the plan for Dunn County, as much as that grant is related, the plan is really focused on helping the county being able to make decisions and move forward in that regard. So, all right. Step one, I like to start with definitions, because we can get through all kinds of different acronyms and different terms out there, and many of them have different definitions. So just to kind of start that off, so when I say things or when we refer to things, so we're all on the same page. So one thing that you'll hear a little bit around in the broadband world is RDOF, which is the Rural Digital Opportunity Fund. That was some federal funding that was back in, I think, 2017, 2018, that the federal government managed that program. And I'll get into, I have a slide kind of related to that. BEAD is the most recent type of funding, that is funding coming out of, and I have it lower on there, the bipartisan infrastructure law or bill. So BEAD is a part of bill. And then we have the PSC, which is a Public Service Commission for the state of Wisconsin. The way that a lot of the federal broadband funds come to a Dunn County. So for instance, BEAD, that funding is made available by the federal government. The state of Wisconsin will then apply for the state's share of that funding. And then the Public Service Commission provides grants to service providers or providers in general within the state of Wisconsin in order to distribute Wisconsin's fund. So the Public Service Commission plays a large role in that. And they are looking for a lot of local feedback as they're looking to get that out. And they are involving UW Extension in a lot of that. So you'll see a lot of UW Extension information out there. In a lot of cases, UW Extension is, I don't want to say they're speaking on behalf of the Public Service Commission, but they are being hired by the Public Service Commission to do a lot of that work. So the next one is unserved. There are multiple definitions. There's actually a definition in state statute for what unserved is. I went with the BEAD definition because that's going to be the definition that is going to be related to a lot of funding. And that is having no internet or speeds below 25 by 3. So that's 25 down, 3 up. Underserved is someone who essentially would have connectivity, but that connectivity is less than 120. So a lot of those funding or different categories are looking at those things. So you'll hear those terms go out, and that's what is being referred to. So someone that is unserved can actually have connectivity. It's just not usable. Bill, I mentioned that's a bipartisan infrastructure law. So that's the one that you heard plenty about. That's where a lot of the infrastructure funding is coming from. The DEA, which is the Digital Equity Act, is also a part of bill. So, but that is specific funding that is related to essentially digital equity, right? So that's going to get more into the affordability and the adoption aspects of broadband. All right. Bill funding. So bipartisan infrastructure law, talked a little bit about that. BEAD is part of that. That is kind of that access layer. That's that infrastructure side of things. DEA is the equity side. The NTIA, see, I went at bad definitions. National Telecommunication Infrastructure Agency, I believe it is distributing funding for middle mile broadband. So that's essentially connecting, let's just say, service providers to service providers. So it's a lot longer. It's not fiber to somebody's curb. That's going to be providing fiber between different kind of larger anchor agencies. And then there's also funding within bill to the USDA for broadband funding. So they're distributing funding also through other mechanisms. So there was lots of infrastructure funding, but it's all broken up into little boxes and how that goes. So just so that you're aware of all of those different things, those are also different funding sources out there to keep in mind as we move forward. I used these words before. I did not make them up. I don't know who I stole them from, but they've been used in the past. Access. So referring to that term of access is having the infrastructure to connect, right? That's having connection at your door. Adoption is helping people choose to use the technology to get people to subscribe, or frankly, just having a desire to use internet. So a lot of adoption comes into that education. And I think there's a lot being looked at as it relates to the older populations and different things like that. UW Extension has a group of people working. Addison, I think you're specifically working related to that, correct, with Chris?
Yeah, I'm supporting him. So my role is as a educator, not specifically in broadband, but I like support broadband. So we have specialists such as Chris that was mentioned, and we have another individual, Gail. Can't remember their last name.
Stark and
Chris Stark.
Yeah, Chris Stark.
Yeah.
And
Heichel.
Yeah, Hike. And then there's one more. And so those are the individuals that are specifically focusing on broadband. There's a lot of us educators, and the educators within Extension are usually what everyone kind of sees. So I'm supporting them with kind of their efforts. And it is like I was saying, it is kind of a part of my role in this position as well. Not every educator actually has a specific broadband designation, but I do. It's just not quite to the same level as like these specialists. But yeah, we are doing a lot, and a lot of it is just partnership. Yeah, so I'm still figuring everything out.
Yes, it's a tangled web. I made a comment at CR&T. If you're interested in a broadband webinar, there's about 3 of them a day that you can take part in. So, and then the last piece of that is affordability. I'll get a little bit more into that, but obviously that's the ability to pay and the willingness to pay. And I will tell you, yeah, UW Extension is doing some surveying about that specific item. And all of these are to build into the state's 5-year broadband plan, which is what they will use to apply for the bill funding for the state, right? So that's where a lot of these different activities that are going on right now are related to that. So just trying to let you know a little of the things that are going on right now. Now a little bit of history. So public funding for fiber, and this is really going to get more into this infrastructure aspect right now. So these are some screen clips of the total funding for this. Is all the state of Wisconsin. This is what the Public Service Commission has released over the last few years for funding throughout the entire state. This next slide kind of comes right down into Dunn County. These are the publicly funded projects that have happened, in Dunn County. It's out on the Public Service website. This is not information that anybody can't find, but you have to open about 8 different PDFs and scroll through them in order to find it. So I tried to throw them all together in there, but those are the projects that have been funded by the by various grants, whether they be state grants or federal grants, but they're all kind of distributed through the Public Service Commission. So you can see the providers in Dunn County and the municipalities that were impacted by those, and quite a lot. Dunn County is not forgotten. We do actually very well in these grants. So our providers have done a great job in applying for them, but we also know that there's still gaps. So the next one, RDOF, as put this out here as it was a missed opportunity for Dunn County, and this is not the fault of anybody in Dunn County or anybody around. So the RDOF funding was an auction. So the FCC identified areas that were lacking in broadband. I believe they used the unserved value for that. And they auctioned them off to providers to say, this is your area and we have this much money out for you to provide internet to that area. So the area, the blue and green image on the left is the companies that won the auctions within Dunn County. You can see there was 2 companies that won. One is CCO Holdings, that's Charter Spectrum. And the other one is LTD Broadband. The graph on the right shows funding that was authorized by the FCC, and the area in orange is areas that were in default, and that is areas where the FCC determined after the auctions that that company would not be able to provide what they promised to provide. So ultimately this LTD Broadband, they were, I believe, like the 2nd highest nationwide in receiving RDOF funding, a large portion of it in Dunn County, and that work is not getting done. So call that a missed opportunity. That was federal money that would have helped Dunn County, but the company that the FCC chose for our area was unable to provide it. And that funding is not available anymore.
So you said it was, you mentioned that it was auctioned. Mm-hmm. So it was like almost like a bid thing. They bid a lower amount to say we can do it for X.
Yep.
Ah, okay.
Yep.
Gotcha.
Yes, and if you go out to the FCC website and if you just Google that company, you'll find some information about that. There was 2 companies. Starlink was the other one that did not that received some auctions but did not get. Ultimately, it was decided that they weren't able to provide what they said they would, so the FCC wasn't going to give them their money. So like I say, missed opportunity. There's really nothing we can do about it, but you will hear, because RDOF has actually been very good for like Eau Claire County, and Spectrum got a large portion of Eau Claire County. So you might hear a lot about RDOF, but unfortunately, Dunn County kind of a little bit of a loser in that regard through no fault of our own. So, and that is also just to kind of follow that up, the FCC or the federal government really kind of after this RDOF thing, they recognize some of the issues in that process. And that's where they've now moved to providing that funding to the state so that you're providing the funding with a little bit more knowledge of the area and the providers that can actually do the work in that area. So maybe a good thing that came out of it. This image is I struggle reading it, but ultimately the purple areas are covered according. This is data from the Public Service Commission, and I will qualify this to say that there isn't a single person around involved in these numbers that feels like these things are very good. But they are what we have right now from a mapping standpoint. So the purple areas are the areas that are covered. So you can see kind of Menominee proper is covered, and a lot of northern Dunn County and southern Dunn County. And then there's this area around Menominee, which you'll hear referred to as the donut. Oh, yes. So, yeah. So the donut around Menominee is one of the areas that's talked about a lot as it relates to Dunn County and where a lot of the deficiencies are. This data was done at a census block level, and the requirements said that if any one person in that census block had connectivity, that was considered a connected census block. So if there was 200 residents in one census block and one person had great connectivity, this map would show all 200 residents as having that. So this is where we know there's some failures in that, but this is, like I said, the best data that we have at this point. And there is some data that Addison collected in surveys back in 2018 or 19. But also a lot's changed. I mean, if you look at a lot of that public funding that's been in that window. So, all right, moving on, the BEAD funding. And I mentioned that there's a grant, and I'll get into a little bit of the details of that grant, but the grant that we have, and as a committee, we kind of have some authority as to how we want that money to be spent. Ultimately, the county board has final say, but we're looking at this group is really going to be the one that's helping define how that gets done. So we'll get into that, but that is all related to the BEAD grant. It is called the BEAD Planning Grant. And I mentioned we have some deliverables, and I think I also mentioned about the state's 5-year broadband plan. So a lot of the deliverables and the work that we're looking to do right now is to provide information to the Public Service Commission to include in the state of Wisconsin's 5-year plan. So a lot of these ongoing efforts right now are really related to getting that information out there so that can be included. And so you can see the August 28th deadline is when the 5-year state action plan is due to the federal government to apply for that bill funding. So as we go through all of this and we talk a lot about BEAD in the planning, a lot of what we're trying to do here is help the Public Service Commission. They're estimating between 700 million and $1.2 billion dollars is available to the state of Wisconsin. So part of this 5-year plan is to have as much data as they possibly can to say it's the 1.2. So that's really what we're trying to do, as well as advocating within that once things get distributed that, all of that money should be spent in Dunn County, or a large portion of it. So that's kind of some of the work that's going on right now that we're looking to do. So this is the plan, the state plan for BEAD. To get that, we're going to get the plan out there, and then they're going to realistically receive those funds, and then they're looking to start the competitive grant process ultimately next summer, I think, is when we're looking to start utilizing that BEAD funding. And I will say that that doesn't mean that there's not going to be grant rounds happening. The state of Wisconsin, I think it's the governor's broadband, I can't remember the name of it, but there's some state funding as well that the PSC is going to be handing out in the meantime, and they're planning on completing that before they start on the federal funds. So multiple grant rounds happening. All right. So that's just kind of a little bit related to that access layer. Once again, getting that infrastructure in the ground. The adoption efforts, there's limited in Dunn County. And I know we're working on that. Eau Claire County actually has a good program that they're putting together. It's really just getting started, but I believe it's kind of the model that a lot of other counties are looking to do. So as we go putting that Dunn County broadband plan in place, right, adoption efforts need to be a part of that. And Jim and I were talking before, I don't want to say what needs to be in the plan, but that needs to be in the plan. So, and then, like I said, UW Extension has a team working on that DEA grant, which is going to be related to some of those adoption type efforts. And again, this is really just about educating people. So you're not paying an internet bill that you're not using, right? Affordability is obviously a huge aspect of this as you talk about our service providers, right? There's a large cost of which we're looking for grant support to put this stuff in the ground. But in the end, these providers also need to make a profit. That's how they run their business, right? So they have to charge what is appropriate, and in order to make a profit. And affordability then becomes an issue. If internet costs too much, people aren't going to use that service. And if people aren't going to use the service provider doesn't want to provide it because it costs money to provide it. So, we've kind of got a vicious circle there. So affordability has to be a huge component of that. And as we talk about the broadband affordability and adoption and things, and I kind of come into this affordability thing as we look at that. There's plenty of places that are covered, and Katie, being our representative from K-12, can probably speak to that. As Dunn County or Menominee has coverage, but there's probably a lot of residents and a lot of students for the school district that don't have it. So this is a huge component about how do we increase the utilization of internet services, and affordability becomes a big piece of that. There is federal funding out there called the Affordable Connectivity Program. I provided a link there. If you go out and look at it, the list of how you can qualify is long and very inclusive. So if you click that link, it will show you. But from a school standpoint, if a family qualifies for reduced lunch, they qualify for the Affordable Connectivity Program. Check that box and they're in. That provides a $30 discount paid each month. It pays to the provider, so that from a consumer standpoint, they just pay $30 less on their bill, but the the provider is reimbursed. And all of the providers in Dunn County have chosen to participate in this program. So, and then I shared a sampling of the utilization of that program. This is February data, so I had to shrink some of the cells or it was going to get way too small. But a lot of the ones that you can't read the titles for is those are the different ways that somebody could enroll. But ultimately that total enrollments, that new enrollments in February was 93 in Dunn County for a total of 2,046 subscribers in Dunn County. So, you know, that's a good number. That's 2,000 people that are connected. And I did share some of our neighboring counties, so you can see, you know, Chippewa and Barron are both larger than, or both have more subscribers. So also some work to do there. And I know that's something that our Human Services Department in Dunn County is aware of this and sharing that with the folks that they are involved with. But that's also something that, you know, as we talk about affordability in a plan is promotion of some of these programs and getting them out there. All right, BEAD grants. See, I keep beating this. So the BEAD grants are provided to the service providers to build infrastructure. A match is required. That match can come from government money. It can come from businesses. It can come from individuals. It can come from eliminating fees, and the service provider can provide some of those funding. And then how much is matched plays a role in whether that project is chosen. And so I think that's a big piece as we talk about putting together a plan and helping the county and other entities, you know, kind of get on board with that, because how we distribute our funds can help certain projects get done. So if we know what we feel is the most important, we can help our providers cover the areas that we feel is most important. So I think of, you know, some of those people that live down a 2-mile township road and they're the only resident down that road. That's not appealing to a service provider. But if we want to get them connected, those are some of those things that we need to look at. And then government partnership is another aspect that plays a significant part in the decision making. And Leanne, I'm putting you on the spot here. Do you want to speak a little bit about the experience Otter Creek had with their matches and partnership with Mosaic?
Sure. Mosaic built out Otter Creek in two different grants. And the first one was before the ARPA money was available. And so they had come to the township and we're going to apply for this grant to build out the northern part of Otter Creek. And at the time, we didn't really have any cash or money that we could contribute to that. But we did have a utility ordinance so that we can charge a fee for utilities to run along the right of way in the town of Otter Creek. So that was a real easy decision. We just waived that right of way fee. And then they were able to put that on their grant application that that would be our contribution, that they would not have to pay that fee. And I should have looked it up to say for sure, but it's something like $75 a foot or something like that. So it would count up if there was, miles and miles of right of way that was being used. And then when the second grant opportunity came along, Mosaic came back. And we really wanted them then to build out the southern part of Otter Creek, since they'd already gotten the northern part of it. And by that time, our ARPA money was available, and that was fairly early in the process. And the guidance that we got is you could use it for sewer, water, or broadband. Well, of course, you're in a rural township, there's not much there for sewer or water. that you're going to spend it on. And we thought that the broadband would be the best way to spend that money, because later on you could have maybe, you know, done part of a road with it or something, but that would be something that would benefit all of the residents in the township rather than just a few residents who lived along a certain road. So we got $54,000. It was, that was, went by resident per resident, got so much for that. So we then contributed all of our ARPA money and then again waived that utility fee. And so then Mosaic was able to get that second grant and then built out the rest of Otter Creek.
Yeah, and I looked at it, I think that second grant with ARPA was about 40% funded by the municipality through those measures, and you know, when led to the approval of those projects and coverage of Otter Creek. So I think this is a great example that the partnerships with the service providers and utilizing those funds and really helping the Public Service Commission understand that in that case, Otter Creek was serious about this. They wanted broadband, and they put their money where their mouth is, and it worked out for them. So just I think a good example.
Add something else too. We had quite a few residents who wrote letters of support in wanting to have the broadband available, because we have people who work remotely. We have people who are trying to attend university classes online at that time, you know, and for schoolwork for their kids. People were talking about having to drive into town and sit outside the library to be able to access that internet access in order for their kids to be able to do their homework and that kind of thing. So that also helps.
Yep. Great examples. All right. Speed local planning grant. So Dunn County is allocated $18,337.40. I have memorized that number. I think it's funny that it's so odd. So we have this money, and the first deliverable that we have, and this funding is put out there specifically for the purpose of this task force, right, is to help counties plan for broadband, right? But there are some deliverables, and like I said, those deliverables are very much related to getting information to the PSC for inclusion into the state 5-year plan. Our deliverables is we need to meet with a group of stakeholders in the county. So we have checked that box as of earlier today. We need to develop a vision for broadband in Dunn County. We need to outreach to stakeholders. And I think, as I had emailed all of you, this is not the extent of the outreach. A lot of you are included because of the people networks that you have or the industries that you work in to speak on behalf of those areas, but also to outreach to those areas in order to receive some more feedback from them that can be used as part of our plan, as part of our goals, as part of our visioning. So we'll get into a little bit more of that. And then I would say also, I think in relation to what Leanne was talking about, is outreach to the stakeholders that are the residents of Dunn County, and to get those, to hear those stories of how people are affected by not being connected, and well, to identify where that is. So that'll be a big portion of what is done here. We need to set some goals. And these would be goals for the broadband plan. And I struggled with this because there's going to be a couple of set of goals, right? We need to set a goals as a task force on how we're going to do things, but there's also goals that are related to what the goals for Dunn County broadband. And then we need to set a budget for, barriers and opportunities. So that is also another area of identifying where are those issues that exist out there. And a lot of this is identifying, like I said, some of those residents on the end of a road, the geographic issues that can lead to issues with the expansion of broadband, identifying where those are, and then identifying some of those opportunities, the low-hanging fruit and other ways that we can enhance broadband, and then come up with a budget. So those grant deliverables are due on June 16th, 19th. And so I don't think they're looking for anything outrageous there. When I originally kind of put this together, the goal was let's create a plan by that day. That may be unrealistic, but I do think that we can come up with some structure around that plan, and maybe even get to a point where we pass that along to the board to say, all right, you need to do X or Y. And then once again, task force deliverables. Our goal was to create a plan. So part of that, we're going to meet the grant deliverables, but the big goal is to create a plan. I went with a really long sentence here: to develop a sustainable plan or process to meet the vision and propose it to the board. So the goal isn't necessarily that this task force is a perpetual group that is planning broadband, but we are posing to the county board how the board should go about that. And that could include, hey, you should create a committee that is a group of wide-ranging stakeholders that is going to be making all of these decisions. That would be kind of part of that plan, or a suggestion as it relates to that plan. So just, I don't want to confuse the grant from the committee, although they're related. All right. Now, this is taking longer than I was expecting. I threw together a little bit of just a Gantt chart to talk about kind of what it looks like to get some of this work done, those initial deliverables, which once again kind of have that hard deadline, and then the rest that doesn't necessarily. And I'm throwing these out here asking for your feedback and how we go about this, and additional tasks that can be done. And I can zoom, but I think it's gonna become difficult. One of the first items out there, and it's kind of an ongoing item, is to identify additional stakeholders. And like I said, I think we need to reach out and identify from other stakeholders within Dunn County why everybody having broadband in Dunn County is important, right? We included some areas, like I said, with K-12. We know that that's important for students to be able to connect to some of these online resources. I know some schools are doing remote days when it snows all the time, right? So, how does that impact these different industries, is just to try and tell that story. So that's some of that initial stakeholder thing. And so I kind of put in there about a month's worth of identifying who it is that we want to talk to. And then we need to identify a vision. And I think that's basically just a sentence, paragraph, something like that this is what it looks like. And I think I've said broadband for everybody. That is the state's vision. So I think, we kind of dig into that a little bit, expanding on why that's important in a vision. And then identifying those barriers, identifying areas lacking broadband. It's again about a about a month's worth of work in doing that, and that's surveying and that's outreach and different items and how we go about that, and we talked through that. And then I put the developing goals after we did some of that information, because it's hard to set goals without kind of a understanding where you are, and then kind of finalizing that plan right afterwards. So that's a really tight schedule. I'm well aware of that. So I welcome any feedback that anybody has to kind of talk about that, or additional steps that you feel like we need to include.
Dan, what do you anticipate kind of the meeting frequency of this group going forward? What are your thoughts on that?
I was thinking maybe every week or every 2 weeks. I do know that as we do some of these things, there's going to be outreach efforts out there that'll probably be me going to do some of that. But that was kind of my hope, and I might kind of increase that to 2 hours. Just as I just talked for 50 minutes, and so that's kind of my thought, is maybe an hour or 2 weekly, just kind of getting into that. I think once we get maybe through a next meeting and say, all right, this is what we want to do, like we need to go set up a survey to do that, right? Then we can come back and talk about that survey in that meeting, and setting up that survey would essentially be something that falls on me and somebody else or whatever to do. Does that make sense?
That makes sense to me. And so with that explain, so a little bit more heavy lifting up front till we kind of get to that finalized plan piece and hitting that deadline. Otherwise, I think your larger topics are spot on, kind of like what you referenced, Dan. There might be some, I don't know what you call them, subtopics that fall underneath, different tactics that help support the larger goals. But I think comprehensively, that's a pretty big sweep of all the different things you need to hit. And then probably some little nuanced things will come out as you go, but looks like a good initial plan to me.
And all right, I'm gonna get back to my PowerPoint. So
is the vision of our task force, are you thinking, or the vision for broadband in Dunn County?
Broadband in Dunn County.
Okay.
Yeah. So yeah, all of these things are specific to that plan, that as it relates to what is the vision for broadband in Dunn County? What are the goals to get broadband to all of these places in Dunn County?
Okay.
Yep. And once again, there's barriers and opportunities. That's all related to that. Our goals are essentially to complete these items. Yep. All right. So I'm gonna, with 5 minutes left, and I know everybody's got busy schedules because I tried to schedule a meeting and get a hold of all of you. With 5 minutes left, I'm gonna go. I wasn't sure how far I was gonna get there, but I think next meeting, that's where we'll kind of get into that vision, so I have some prompts for you to maybe think about before that next meeting. If you can maybe put a few of those thoughts in your head for sorry, see your chat here. Vision of, see, there you go. So providing, storing some of that stuff, bringing that to that next meeting so that we can kind of discuss and maybe just have a meeting to put together a vision, and we'll kind of plan on doing that in our next meeting, and then talking about the next item that I had in here is, I have the goals and how do we get there, because I think that, you know, those outreach efforts are kind of related to how do we get to defining those goals. So that'll be kind of what we'll put on the next meeting. But the last item on our, so I'll kind of skip forward from the vision and goals, and we'll work on that in the next meeting. And I think our last item then is to set a schedule. What is there, and I kind of know the answer here, but is it realistic to say 1 o'clock every Thursday?
That would be fine with me.
And surprisingly, so far, that looks like it works for me.
Same here.
Well, that wasn't
You're
supposed to
very
be that
lucky.
easy. So,
That would mainly work for me too, Dan. I may have one or two that may have a little bit of a conflict, but in majority it works.
okay. All right. Well, so I will I'll get a room scheduled. And we'll just plan on meetings at 1 o'clock on Thursday, and we'll talk about them at the end of the next meeting. But in general, if you just kind of want to block off that, I can send out a meeting invite so you don't have to do the work. But if you just want to block off that time, and we can adjust as necessary, but we'll just kind of keep that as our baseline. And it's not like me, but I guess I would be willing to adjourn here about 2 minutes early. If you couldn't tell, I can talk for an hour straight.
Well, you had a lot of stuff to cover.
Yeah.
So
does anybody have any questions? And I guess I would put it up. You don't have to do all the legwork research. If you do have any questions about different things, I probably already done the work, and I can I'd be happy to kind of present a lot of that. There's a lot that's gone on, and Addison actually has a long history in doing a report for Dunn County back in 2018. So if you do have any questions or items that you want me to cover going forward, let me know. All right. I guess with that, we can adjourn.
Thanks, Dan. Appreciate it.
All right. Thanks. Bye.
You.
Bye, everyone.